see, strongest wind gusts. So these are sustained winds near about 17 miles per hour, but just a few moments ago we had a wind gust near 25 miles per hour, and that will be the theme for the first half of the day. Periods of dryness, yes, some rain also mixed in. And speaking of that rain, that can lead to the threat of flash flooding. A lot of residents here know that they live in a low-lying area, so they had to get their cars to higher ground. Take a listen to this experience from one resident here in Key West.
There's campers, there's vans, there's cars, there's old cars, antique cars that people usually have hidden at their house if they don't want to get destroyed, stuff like that. The parking lot is a much higher elevation than the rest of Key West.
Yeah, so it's all about elevation. You're practically at sea level if you do live here in Key West or really anywhere in the Keys, Florida. The winds will still be strong and persistent today. The overall flow is from the south. So, Kelly, that can lead to the threat of some storm surge, perhaps 1 to 3 feet for the worst reasonable scenario. Kelly?
All right, glad to see the sun shining on your face, Tevin, taking a little bit of a break, at least from the heavy rain, but the wind is still blowing, and we do expect that to continue today, even though Eta is actually moving away from Florida right now. Winds are 65 miles per hour. It's moving to the west at 13 miles per hour, but notice these outer rain bands. Look how far they go to the east, all the way over into South Florida. We have reports of so many roads underwater and impassable across Broward and Miami-Dade counties. So tropical storm warnings are still in effect for a good chunk of South Florida, meaning tropical storm winds of at least 39 miles per hour. And we do think it is forecast, the National Hurricane Center saying this could become a hurricane as we go into our Tuesday. But notice the movement of Eta moving toward the southwest, hanging out in the Gulf of Mexico, pretty much all week long. And then some models take it eastward back to Florida. Some actually dissipate it or weaken it significantly over the Gulf waters. It all depends on the timing of a trough, and we'll see if it picks it up or not. In the meantime, though, we are concerned about additional flooding. We've already had many flash flood warnings in effect overnight into this morning. Some spots seeing as much as 11 inches of rain with Eta. And so flash flood warnings do continue for portions of Broward and Miami-Dade counties. This goes until 11 o'clock this morning, and it's all that east wind, too, just pushing that water through the showers, the thunderstorms. And you'll notice when you get into some of these rain bands, your winds will increase. Right now at Homestead, we're gusting to nearly 30, but look at Miami. We're gusting to 38 miles per hour right now. That's just 1 mile per hour shy of tropical storm strength. You get up towards Lake Okeechobee, the winds are not as bad, but check out Fort Myers. Even on the west side of Florida, it's getting a little breezy out there with each and every one of these rain bands that affects us with Eta. We do think the rain from Eta will continue for much of the day today, so flash flood watches actually go until tomorrow, if not even extended beyond that. So here's a look at our future radar. You see the showers, the thunderstorms. Remember, Eta's going away, but the rain bands are still with us. This is all that tropical moisture that continues to feed into these thunderstorms, and some of these thunderstorms too, Jordan, could produce severe weather. We can't rule out the possibility of isolated tornadoes.
That's right. And you know what? We're going to take our big 2 weather stories for today. The tropical story that we're talking about in Florida, plus the snow along the northern tier of the country. We had some blizzard. We're going to combine them along the East Coast and create cooler weather, but more importantly, a lot of rainfall. So late in the week, this is what we're looking at. Cold front working its way through the mid-Atlantic, the deep south. The tropical energy is still going to be there. And so we could be looking at a lot of rainfall here, because notice where Eta is, right? And we've got the wind flow pulling it all along that front. The front's going to allow for plenty of the air to lift, our lifting mechanism. So the rainfall will be plentiful over the next couple of days. The European model here suggests that if Eta does decide to shift its way north and east up towards the Florida Panhandle, that Florida-Georgia line, you're going to be seeing a lot of precipitation, maybe 5 to 8 inches. This is going to, of course, be over the next 5 days. Now, if the GFS model comes to fruition, we're going to put a bulk of that energy over the Carolinas, okay? Maybe 3 to 5 inches over places like Raleigh, Durham, just outside of Norfolk. We also have 1 to 2 inches widespread, and I think a lot of us are going to see precipitation either way, but some of us are going to see a lot more of it. So there is a flood potential, and a lot of that's going to ride right there along the Appalachians, because that's going to allow for orographic lifting to take place and more precipitation, more runoff, and all of that. By the way, if we take a look at long run, You could say that a lot of us are over this, to say the least, but here's a look at where the tropics stand as of right now. We've got Eta on the left side of your screen. We've got an area to watch down in the Caribbean. We got another spot, Invest 97L. Both have a chance to maybe become another named entity, which would by far be the record that we've ever seen a named storm this late in the season. Here's a look at Invest 97L, 40-mile-per-hour winds right now, and of course that does have a chance to becoming the next named storm. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. That is something that we're all looking forward to. Jim Cantori is live in Marco Island, Florida, tracking the storm that we know is here right now. Hey, Jim.
Jordan, I feel like I've done 3 tropical seasons all in one. That's what it feels like this year. Eta, again, rains have come in, rains have gone out, but they're ready for it nonetheless. Everything kind of stacked up against the back of the beaches here. We'll give you a live update coming up. Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. Another record broken in the tropics. Our 12th named storm to landfall here of this incredible 2020 season. And believe it or not, we are actually watching 2 other areas in the Atlantic for possible development. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's talk about this. We're on Marco Island this morning, and the good news for us here on the west side is a lot of the weather has been coming from the east, so it's been dampened. The rain has gotten into drier air. The wind has been dampened by the friction of the land. Not the case, though, on the east side, especially in Fort Lauderdale and Boca and down toward Miramar and Miami, where we've had tremendous amounts of rain. Double-digit rainfall, unofficially at Miramar, 16.7 inches. Key Largo, where Jen Carfagno is at, over 15 inches of rain. So lots of stuff. As a matter of fact, we've got live team coverage out covering Eta for you with Tevin Wooten in Key West, Jen Carfagno in Key Largo, Mike Seidel in Miami, and Chris Bruin in Fort Lauderdale. We will check in with them later as they've had a very wet night with lots and lots of flooding. Water as high as maybe the beginnings of coming into people's homes in some parts of Broward County. So that's how big it has gotten. Yeah, I know you're thinking it's a beach. How can that happen? Think about how high we are. We've had double-digit rains. We've got double-digit surpluses so far this year. There's only so much water they can take out of the canal. And with the easterly wind, it's hard to get the water to drain. So if it's coming down at 1 to 2 inches an hour, it's not going anywhere. It's just piling up in the streets. So that's what's been essentially happening. If you're just joining us this morning from a busy weekend, lower Matacumba Key is where we had the landfall. That's near Isla Mirada, tropical storm, 65 miles per hour, 991 was the pressure. We're not too far from what that was yesterday right now, as a matter of fact. All right, you can see it at about 65 miles per hour. It continues to move away from us and away from the Keys, but all because this is so lopsided, unlike all the other storms we've dealt with, a lot of the weather is on the east side of it, and that's where it's going to stay. So even though the storm moves west during the day, the weather may just kind of drift to the west-southwest. So some of our worst weather may be to come here at Marco. All right, then it gets interesting. And when we talk to Dr. Greg Postel in a moment, we're going to kind of take this in sections. So sometimes you see forecasts out day 1 through 3, and then day 3 through 6, and then day 7 through 10. I mean, we're going to have to take it that way because there's different things that happen during these different days. So you can see the Hurricane Center brings us up to potentially a hurricane Tuesday and Wednesday. I think those are the days that could happen if it's going to happen at all. Then, does the trough at least bump this to the north? Does the ridge off the east coast take control as the main steering between the ridge and the trough that's coming into the west now? That's brought you guys the cooler temperatures. That's the same one that may lift the entity to the north. It will lift the moisture, but it may not lift the circulation entirely. Either way, we remain in tropical storm warnings across South Florida, and it's not only the coastal counties in Southwest Florida and South Florida, but it's also the inland counties as well, as these bands are going to come across with gusty winds. But certainly the worst weather has been in South Florida with double-digit rainfall and winds close to hurricane force. All right, I want to bring in Dr. Greg Postel to talk about some of the current weather that's going on with this, well removed from the center. Greg, and like I said, depending on what you're doing with this particular segment, it's almost like we're going to deal with this for such a long time. We have to take the first 2 days and then the days following that for another 3 days, because there could be a lot of differences in what this actually becomes, right?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And the key through all of that is that we're going to be dealing with Eta for a long time yet to come. Let's take one more look at that cone, Jim, because this is what you showed earlier. This is a little bit of a cleaner version of it. But just to give you an idea of, there's the NHC's track. But the important point is here that maybe later this week and maybe next weekend, we'll still be dealing with Eta over water. That is indeed a possibility. But there's a lot of uncertainty, and let me explain that. Because if you plot some of the other models in here, they're all over the place. I mean, it literally is spaghetti. I don't typically like using that phrase for it, but the idea is that lots of different models are saying lots of different things about where Eta is going. We don't really have that good an idea of it. We do know that we'll be dealing with it for a while. But exactly where it will be during this time period, is practically up for grabs. Practically. The best, I think, advice is to follow the cone and the updates from the National Hurricane Center. But keep in mind that may change, and may change more than it typically does from one advisory to the next, based on the amount of uncertainty left in the forecast. Right now, the winds across parts of South Florida are still pretty stout. I mean, we're getting gusts in some places to 40. We know we've had wind gusts up to 60 in some spots, but I think the winds will begin to relax a little bit as Eta here moves away. But look at what you're looking at in the satellite pictures. There's hardly any deep, tall thunderstorms in there. Looking at some of the enhanced echo tops in there, the cloud tops are generally less than 30,000 feet in altitude. That means that this storm is not very intense. And one of the reasons why is because it's got a lot of dry air that's gotten wrapped into this thing. It's been this way for a while, over at least a day or two. But the idea is that extremely low relative humidity has come all the way around and secluded this thing. So this is not really a situation that favors a lot of strong thunderstorms and a strong tropical system. The hurricane hunters are in there right now and telling us practically just that. We're finding 50 to 60 mile per hour winds in the region. I want to go through two more graphics, so you need to follow me on this. This is a forecast for that dry air that is keeping it relatively weak right now. Jim was talking about this. This is important, that by midweek there may be a spot here secluded from the dry air that could allow some strengthening. That's why the Hurricane Center in part is going with that possibility of a stronger storm by midweek. As shown you by the models, this is the last graphic I'm showing you. This is Tuesday and this is Wednesday. If this thing is going to strengthen, it's going to be in that window, and that's in part because maybe it finds some safe harbor away from that dry air. Jim, I'm going to bring you in and talk about that because it does look like there is that short window, but before that and after that, it's probably not going to find itself a very hospitable environment to be in.
No, especially afterward. I mean, it looks like it's gone after that.
Right.
And that's the thing, Greg. The center may actually never make landfall again. That's one of the possibilities, right? But let's talk about the moisture with it, because that certainly looks like it's going to remain impactful for Florida, regardless what strength we achieve in the short term and even in the long term, right?
Yeah, even while Eta, let's say, is far away from the center, would be far away, let's say, from the Florida Peninsula next week, there's still likely to be some version of an east wind across much of Florida, bringing in some Atlantic moisture. So from time to time, Jim, there still may be showers that linger well beyond where we think Eta might normally be impacting Florida. So even if it's over the Gulf of Mexico at a great distance, there could still be bad weather over South and Central Florida for that matter.
All right, so Greg, given the changes that we are seeing like days 2, 3 and beyond, is there a chance, like here I am in Marco, okay, so Southwest Florida, is there a chance this could become a hurricane again and then move rapidly this way and not sit out and fester over the water?
Well, there's not a whole lot of model guidance that suggests that is a real likelihood. It's possible, Jim. I think it's more likely that it does strengthen over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico, let's say in that next 24 to 72 hours in that time frame. But Jim, overall, I'm not sure that it's got much of an opportunity to take a hard right turn toward the east and come right back at Central Florida. It may, but that does not seem likely really at all.
Well, yeah, and it's certainly none of the guidance is showing that yet. But as we've been seeing, every couple of days, the guidance kind of changes its mind a little bit. So I'm just throwing that possibility out there. But you're right. It is on the lower end of the probability scale. All right, I'm going to grab my computer here. I'm going to step off camera for 1 second because I did set it down. But I want to talk about the rain because this is really a big deal, a very big deal. We've had double-digit rainfall totals across Broward and Miami-Dade County. And not just on the coast, but inland. Okay? So we've had a lot of water inland here. And of course, guess where the water inland is trying to go? Back out to the Atlantic Ocean. So in addition to the rain that's falling on top of you at the beach, all the rain that's falling inland is trying to get past the beach and out into the water. But it's having a hard time doing that because we have an east wind. The tides come up. When the tides come up, that holds the water back too. So it really just piles up over the interior. So really to watch this band all day today, how it breaks up, how it congeals, how it may shift southwest, what have you, I think that's important. And that is really as big a part of this Eta story and what it actually becomes as anything, because this is the impact, right? This is what's actually going on at the present time. So we have to watch this. So flooding certainly possible from the Palm Beaches all the way down through Miami-Dade. We could have a severe thunderstorm. We get any kind of sun in through here with these bands, and we could crank up the instability just enough to get a little spin. That's not impossible with this particular storm. But notice again, as we go into the future, a lot of that rain kind of shifts to the south again and west. So the Keys, you may not be out of this. You may not be out of it certainly on the southwest side either. We could see another 3 to 5 inches in spots, especially where these rain bands seem to park a home. But notice that big blob that's kind of sitting out there over the water, okay? That's where we think some of the heaviest rain will start to concentrate once we get past tonight. Much more to come here on our continuing coverage of our 12th landfalling tropical system of the year. Jen Carfagno, you're not done in Key Largo either.
Yeah, no, that's right, Jim. Yeah, the 12th landfall of the season, the first one for Florida, despite how active it has been in Florida. You know, you think of as sort of the hurricane capital, but this is the first landfall officially for the state. Sally actually made landfall in Alabama. A lot of folks have questioned that. Now, here in Key Largo, I've showed you some of the wind damage already today. There's not a lot of flooding, but there is some, especially in flood-prone areas, and this is still left over from the rainfall that we had right through the overnight and even some early this morning. This is Gilbert's Resort, and you can see how this entire parking lot is just filled.
Yep. Looks like we lost Jen Carfagno. Then we'll try to get back to her in just a bit as we're talking about what's going on with the storm surge flooding at this point. Not seeing too much of it there across the peninsula. A little bit more, up to about a half a foot water rise there for us in parts of the Keys. But here's what it looks like when it comes to some of those winds at this hour. You're seeing generally 15 to maybe 20 mile an hour wind shear force sustained with gusts getting up into the 20 to 25 mile an hour range. A little bit stronger, though, once we start talking about some of those buoys. Farther south now, looking in on the Keys, you can see some of these winds that are showing up. Key West right now, 21 mile per hour wind showing up there for you. Over towards Marathon, 16 mile per hour sustained wind. But again, you're watching those gusts creeping up to right around 26 miles per hour. You see some of those rain bands continuing to flow across that general zone. The general area of low pressure in the center of the circulation should continue to pull away, but we're still going to be dealing with the issues here right along the coast when it comes to the rip current risk. In fact, not just the west coast, but the east coast. We've got a high risk for rip currents in those areas. Now, of course, the wind field is pretty large with this thing, so we're seeing winds all the way up towards Jacksonville. That could be gusting 30 to 35 miles per hour here as we work our way through the morning and into the afternoon. So really a breezy day on tap for many of us here, even into tonight. Key West there could be looking at 30 to 35 mile an hour winds before they come down just a tad heading into Tuesday afternoon in that 20 to 25 mile an hour range there. So again, breezy conditions here for us for this early part of the week. And of course, what's going to be happening with Eta here as we head down the road? Does it try to approach the west coast of Florida again here for us as we work our way on in towards the mid part of the week? We're certainly going to be watching that very, very closely. Just a lot of different possibilities at this point when it comes to what Eta will be doing. All right, are we heading to Tevin? All right, Tevin, you're watching what's going on there. I know you've been seeing some peaks of sunshine here and there, but how are things faring for you at this hour?
Yeah, Alex, absolutely. It's not a bad morning shaping up here in Key West, Florida. As I walk out, we do have low clouds hanging about but also some peaks of sunshine here or there. And then, of course, you can see the waves that are coming in. That's because of the strong storm system, or because of Eta and the winds that it has produced, even though the winds are still stronger on the east side of the storm, and the storm is well west of us. But that can happen when you have a lopsided storm like such. The trees are also blowing as well. It's able to get winds right around 17 miles per hour for some of the sustained winds, but some strong gusts today between 25 and 30 miles per hour. If we take a look at the maps, we'll show you a little bit more about what we're anticipating here across central and southern Florida and all through the Keys as well, because we want to go town by town and talk about the timing of this. If you notice how on the upper Keys and the central Keys, we're actually sort of perfectly aligned, if you will, or unfortunately aligned for some of the stronger showers between perhaps Marathon and Key Largo, all to about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then it shifts after that. We get strong storms and some of those stronger bands on the southern Keys and right here in Key West. So we'll have to watch for that. We've already had about 1 inch to 1.25 inches of rainfall here in Key West. Now, I think there's certainly more to go, especially as some of these stronger bands do have what's known as a higher precipitable water value. So essentially the entire moisture or the entire column of moisture is pretty stout. Typically you don't see 2.5 to almost 2.75 inches of rain engulfed in that column of water. So Jim, we do still have that flash flood threat here across the southern Keys and the central Keys and the upper Keys too. Not exactly like what we saw in southeastern Florida. I did just check out some of the maps from the National Hurricane Center, Jim. Just to the south into the Straits of Florida, 8 to 14 inches of rain in the past 2 days. So we narrowly missed it.
Yeah, it's crazy. We have unofficial amounts, Tevin, over 16 inches at Miramar. So, you know, that's a lot of water, no question about it, and that's all come to fruition. Either way, guys, they're ready for it here at Marco. Whether this thing comes back at us or goes out and dies in the Gulf, it really doesn't matter. You can see the jet skis are up, the paddle boards are up, the shutters on the condominium here not too far from us pretty much got closed around the windows just to be safe. We love it. We love it, Marco.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
And here at Marco Island, just one of the many places that's actually kind of picked up the fun, the toys, if you will, and kind of brought them back toward the end of the beach. As we kind of swirl out here, you can see just how far this is from the beach. But you know what? It doesn't take much. The forecast here was about 2 to 4 feet in terms of the storm surge. That never came to fruition, and that's the good news. So you don't have to really worry about that. But this area, very prepared for dealing with this. So you couldn't be prouder of the folks here in Collier County for getting ready. The beach chairs are off. The surfboards are up, and of course the jet skis are up as well and through here. So Alex Wallace, there is a small chance, and I mean very small, that we deal with something that comes our way maybe later on this week, because you never know the farther out we go. Certainly the probabilities get higher again, you know, for dealing with some of this somewhere in Florida. We know we're going to deal with the moisture, so it looks like an unsettled week. But right now, it's all about that Miami-Dade and Broward County and Palm Beach area. I mean, they are just getting absolutely soaked with rainfall.
You said it, absolutely, Jim. Just goes to show you that you don't have to be right at that center to feel those impacts. We talk about this so many times when it comes to these tropical systems. Meanwhile, we work our way into the Midwest, and boy, yeah, the other big story, November warmth. Certainly doesn't feel like November in a place like Chicago, and it hasn't for a while. I mean, we've hit at least 70 degrees the last 5 days, with 2 record highs that have been set in that span. And you'll be nearing the mid-70s for a high today. And you got to remember, our average high for this time of the year, the lower 50s. So we are well above that there, and it's not just Chicago. I mean, we've got this pretty widespread. Here's what it looks like for today. I mean, we've got some areas here across the Great Lakes into the Northeast, 20 to even 30 degrees above average. Very, very mild times, and that continues into tomorrow. Notice the western part of the country, that's where we're finding some of the cooler than average temperatures there. But really the east, it's above average warmth here for us as we work through this November, and that means the potential for some more record highs. There's a number of cities that'll be within range here as we head through the day. Let's get into a few of them. Louisville, how about 80 for your afternoon? The record is 77 degrees there. Tying a record in Nashville if we can get to 81 degrees. And then moving into parts of the Northeast, Binghamton, that could crush the record. The record is 66. We're forecasting 71 degrees out there for you. And again, we keep it going tomorrow because this warmth is going nowhere. Heading into parts of the southeast for tomorrow. Macon's a spot that'll be close. Your record is 81, 79 degrees. May come up a little shy there in Macon, but you get the picture. Very, very warm times are ahead. Now, one thing we'll also be following is, well, some potential wet and maybe even some snowy weather across parts of the Midwest. Dr. Postel?
Yeah, once again, Alex, we've got thunderstorms and snow kind of like right next to each other, the kind that only fall can provide. Let's have a look right now across parts of the northern plains. I mean, look at what we've got. We've got thunderstorms this morning on November 9th rolling through central and northern Minnesota, where the temperature in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, in the mid-60s, 66 in La Crosse, but behind the front, clearly winter-like conditions are dominant with temperatures in the 20s and 30s. So with that kind of temperature contrast, naturally we've got that unsettled weather in that zone with rain on the warm side, with thunder and snow on the cold side. But I think it's going to get even a bit more interesting going forward because, yes, we've got that front today stretching like that. But we will also see a little bit of an area of low pressure, some development taking place along the front, as it often happens. And we will see that area of low pressure move to the north. And that will draw even colder air to the backside of it and bring a more substantial area of accumulating snow to parts of Iowa and Minnesota, including, I think, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and that region likely by tomorrow or tomorrow night. Look at this map. That's tonight. This is where we start to see that area of low pressure begin to develop. Steady snow may be in progress in Minneapolis tomorrow, where right now it is in the mid-60s, and that might even be more substantial as we head toward tomorrow night, even into western Wisconsin, with accumulations likely. And Alex, it might be a few inches easy. Our models are going 3 to 5 in some spots. Back to you.
All right. Meanwhile, we're dealing with some tropical downpours a bit farther to the south. The same front trying to move its way east, and out ahead of that, tropical moisture being focused here across the southeast and up across and throughout a good portion of the east coast here for us as we head through the latter part of the week. Now, of course, we've got Eta hanging out here in the Gulf of Mexico. And again, the moisture being funneled northbound on the backside of this area of high pressure there that's situated there in the Atlantic. So that's going to mean some wet weather here for us over the next several days, downpours, and the possibility for some flash flooding in a few locations. Here's the European model's depiction of what the rainfall may look like over the next few days. Now, remember, the European model takes Eta and moves its way across North Florida, southeast Georgia. It spits out quite a bit of rain in that area, in that zone. If that model is correct, we could see that. The GFS model, you see not much here because it doesn't bring it into this general area. But it does have some heavier rain as the front moves east and more moisture is across eastern sections of North Carolina. So some differences there. You get the point, though. There's going to be some wet weather to be had for some of these areas across the southeast. Heading on through Tuesday into Wednesday, there's a lot of green showing up. So expect rain showers and storms, again, pretty widespread here for us from those areas from the Gulf Coast up into the Northeast. And with Wednesday into Thursday's forecast showing the possibility of some flash flooding in a few locations. Well, after the break, we're going to be tracking, of course, Eta as it lashes parts of Florida with some of that rain and wind. Live reports from the Sunshine State, and, of course, more expert analysis.
Hey, good morning, everyone, from Marco Island here on the southwest side of Florida, kind of dealing with what is coming out on the east side. Pardon the pun, but watered down a little bit. And we'll explain what we mean by that. We want to get you caught up on the latest and what we know right now. Of course, Eta making landfall, likely be known for days after catastrophic flooding and landslides have been occurring there from the almost 3 feet of rain. That was just the estimates. There could have been more than that. As of now, at least 118 people are confirmed dead, but that number, sadly, is expected to rise. November tropical systems that get caught in slow steam steering are not a good thing, especially in Central America or the Caribbean. So there's your landfall point. Again, as we mentioned, still got a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm on our hands. But as has been the case, the weather is removed from the center. It's been away from the center, and that's why Miami-Dade has been getting absolutely creamed. We've got unofficial reports at Miramar of over 16.5 inches of rain there. We've got that band of rain, which is set up in Broward as well. The Palm Beaches, there's another band up that way, and that is coming over this way. Granted, there's some dry air in and getting, as I said earlier, watered down a little bit, so it's a little bit calmer by the time it gets here. Our winds aren't bad at all because the friction of the land is robbing that low-level wind, at least from where our vantage point is. So look at the track. Holy smoke. You're like, what gives? It goes southwest, then it goes north. Well, we know that the steering is going to take it to the west-southwest. It is at that point, over the next 2 days, if we're going to get a hurricane, I think that's its best chance. All right? And if it comes back to the northeast, is it going to come back hard right, or is it going to gradually drift to the north, or is it going to drift north and then west? So the longer time it actually takes to do that and goes north, we actually have a better chance of even getting it further to weaken further. Now, that doesn't mean that all week we will go dry in Florida once the storm moves out into the Gulf. All right? It's going to probably remain very, very wet, given the steering currents that we have and the high precipitable water values and the east wind and things like that. But tropical storm warnings continue from Sarasota all the way down through the Keys and back up through the Space Coast as well, where that onshore wind should keep the breezes at least gusting to tropical storm force. All right, guys, let's find out what Dr. Postel is looking at this morning. And it's kind of interesting, Dr. Postel, looking at the center and what we've dealt with so far, especially with the Greek storms, where they've really been true tropical systems, where a lot of the energy is near the center and in the eye wall and in the circulation center. This one, a little different.
This one is actually, yes, a lot different, Jim. When you look at it on the satellite pictures, you might be thinking to yourself, well, where is it? Where's the beef, right? I mean, we don't have a lot of big thunderstorms near where the center of circulation is right now. And actually, that's been the case. Even yesterday, I tweeted out when Eta was over here, just to the southeast of Miami, it did appear that the tallest cloud, or the radar echoes, were coming in at about 20,000 feet. Telling us that there weren't a lot of big thunderstorms anywhere near the apparent center of circulation, and that is still the case today. There are not a lot of bright reds near the middle. That's a good thing. That is limiting the strength of Eta right now. There is a lot of dry air around it. That is one of the reasons why we're seeing this sort of interesting structure to it. The dry air has come in, and this has really been a key at preventing Eta from becoming a much more significant hurricane. You might think this is sort of an academic exercise I'm going through. It's not. It's one of the things that we look at to assess the intensity, why it's behaving the way it is, and why it will behave the way it will in the future. You have to look at the atmosphere surrounding it, and we're doing just that. There's an incredible injection of dry air. This thing has been captured by a mid-latitude upper trough. In other words, a dip in the jet stream, essentially, that has brought a lot of that sort of non-tropical air into its interior. And as a result, we're really not finding that strong a system right now. 50 to 60 mile per hour winds, according to the hurricane hunters. And I expect that at least in the next, say, 6 to 12 hours, it's hard to see this thing getting a bit stronger. But let me make a forecast here going forward, not just from today, but probably tomorrow and even just a little bit beyond. There's Eta, and I put the Hurricane Center's track on here, all the while putting on the forecast of the relative humidity aloft. So the bottom line is, look at this, by Wednesday morning, maybe, if indeed, let's just say Eta is out here in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, it may be somewhat sequestered from that drier air and have some chance for strengthening. That is something to watch, because eventually we think the dry air will win out and the weakening trend will ultimately be the case in the northern Gulf late in the week.
All right, even though Eta is moving away from South Florida, it continues to impact South Florida. Live look again at the camera here. You can see what appears to be certainly some rain coming down. It is. The lens is wet out and through here, and we've had a lot of rainfall. Double-digit totals in Miami-Dade and Broward County, up into the Palm Beaches. It's been very, very wet. And, of course, they did the best they could in getting a lot of these canals drained because we already had double-digit surpluses for the year. Well, here's the deal. You got double-digit rainfalls now that you have to get out, and it's hard to do that with an east wind and rainfall rates at 1 to 3 inches an hour. So we have flooding this morning across Broward, Miami-Dade counties. As a matter of fact, a lot of it now shifting south a little bit toward Miami-Dade, and so we're giving Broward a break. And every little break you can get means the water can drain and recede and go back out into the Atlantic. But until we get them, it's hard to do that. And you can see here we're watching this rain continue to drift down to the south and continue maybe even at times to head into the northern Keys. So we're going to watch this band kind of drift today a little bit north and south, and then eventually it should come south as the circulation center and the whole entity that is known as Eta goes to the south and west. So there you see, unofficial, by the way, Miramar, my good buddy Mike Macedo tells me over 16.5 inches of rain. Whew. Yeah, double-digit rainfall totals, hence the flash flood potential. Flash flood watch is posted essentially from Vero all the way across to Cape Coral and south into the Keys. And I know you're thinking, well, Jim, you're standing on this sand. How could it possibly flood? There's also a lot of asphalt and concrete incorporated into this sand, so the water kind of piles up on top of that. We'll see if we get any kind of sun here and instability. Certainly a small chance for a spin-up, especially as the band heads south a little bit later on this afternoon. But we're going to get some of our worst weather, I think, toward mid-morning, and then maybe a few more showers certainly this afternoon with these bands here in Marco Island. So more rain to come, mainly for South Florida, where they don't need it. We've got these huge surpluses. But notice, even on our rain map, the heaviest rain totals should fall either over Florida or back out over the water as we go through the next several days, which is perfect. We don't need any more rain on shore. All right, Key Largo, which is where we find Jen Carfagno. Jen, you not only had the heavy rain, over 15 inches reported there, but you've also had the wind and the wind damage.
Yeah. And you know what, Jim, I talked to a resident earlier, and they said it was a little tougher than they expected it to be. It was about the time of landfall when things really ramped up, and you saw it on the radar too. Like all of a sudden, that circulation, that eye wall, if you will, around the center of circulation, really got strong as it was approaching Key Largo. And I want to show everyone what it did. Now, there's a lot of tree debris down, branches, etc. But this is the biggest tree that I have seen come down, and unfortunately, it came down right on this house with the resident inside. He was watching TV with his dog. Now, I had the chance to talk with him earlier this morning, and he said, he didn't hear anything. He didn't hear it coming. It was all very unexpected. All of a sudden, the roof was down, collapsed on him, and he was able to get out. A neighbor, thankfully, was right here, heard it happen, was outside, and was able to help him get out of the house. And luckily, the tree kind of fell right on top of the island inside, so the dog was also okay. He was in that area, and the dog was able to get out safely as well. And I did talk to him. He, of course, had to go to the hospital, but he was okay. A couple of injuries, but otherwise okay, which is just amazing when you see a tree like that down on top of a house. And I also just learned that this house is a very historic home. This is one of those railroad houses from when, the railroad was being built here in the original settlement of the Florida Keys. And so, it's hard to, recreate then as they try to repair and do all the renovations on something like this. So definitely a lot of loss with this little bungalow that was just completely demolished. I mean, the house, the roof is completely all the way down with the amount of force of this big tree. Now, today, again, it's going to be a day of cleanup. I did, drive around and I saw a lot of debris down, in some cases blocking roads, many other cases the debris is just off to the side. You could still get around, but I'd urge people not to go sightseeing. Just leave all the, first responders time to get things cleaned up so that you can get out there and safely drive around. We're still going to be in and out of showers today too, Tevin, and that's the thing about the timing, that we're still in this for 2 more days now, getting into some of those squalls. Maybe not the winds that cause this kind of damage, but we still could have some gusty winds.
Yeah, Jen, absolutely. That's going to happen when you get a tropical entity or a tropical system like we have with Eta. It's not the perfect storm in the sense that it doesn't look textbook. However, it is still a storm no less. So we're in and out of periods of showers all throughout the day today and even into our Tuesday. So far here in Key West, we've seen close to 1 inch of rainfall. There's still more to come, especially by the early evening and the overnight hours tonight. Some of the strongest wind gusts near 20, 25 miles per hour. Those will pick up at times too, but right now it's not all that bad at all. In fact, it's great. Feels nice out here, 75 degrees, blue skies. You can see the waves crashing in, but if we pull up the future radar, you do notice that we will have, again, those showers coming in or out, seemingly almost with no rhyme or reason, but there's a reason to it. It's Mother Nature here. So looking at the future radar, we'll go throughout the afternoon today. There are some of those showers again by the midday hours and beyond. Notice how they sort of just align themselves between the upper keys and the lower keys as well. You get dry spells here or there. Now, some of those squalls can have heavy rain, but also tropical storm force winds or perhaps winds near hurricane force. We've got much more to come with Tropical Storm Eta. Stick around after this quick break.
And good morning, everyone. Looking at pictures of really what has been the calling card of Eta, and that is lots and lots and lots of rainfall. Miami-Dade, Broward counties, the Palm Beaches getting absolutely crushed. A lot of double-digit totals coming in and through here. A lot of high water. And remember, this is coming off of what are double-digit surpluses for the year. So they made a special effort to get as much water out of this area that they could through the canals. But there's only so much you can get out. When you're all asphalt and whatnot, that water's going to fill those canals quickly. And then when it tries to push out, the east wind holds it in. So it's kind of a double negative. So that's how you get water to pile up on the beaches. We don't have that problem. Our winds are offshore here at Marco, okay? The rainfall that you're getting on the east side is, pardon this, watered down by the time it gets here, but that's fine. The folks at Marco are very happy with that. But that doesn't mean they weren't prepared. So I got to hand it to Collier County for doing that. You know, right at this particular spot that we're at, you can see that a lot of the jet skis pulled way back off the beach, like maybe 150 yards or so off the beach. You know, umbrellas, none of those are obviously up today. And even the shutters on some of these condominiums pull all the way around for protection here. I love this. And honestly, this should be a lesson. I mean, if you live in paradise like this, you know, overprotecting or protecting for you thought that's something that could come and actually being rewarded with the fact that, hey, this thing didn't turn out to be much here. That's always great news. So well done, Collier County. Now, that said, are we out of the woods here in Marco Island? Maybe, maybe not. The chances are we could be. But there's still a chance, Dr. Greg Postel, that Eta could become a hurricane again in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico.
Yes, there is a chance, and we have to watch out for trends. And I think if that does happen, the window of opportunity is probably Tuesday to Wednesday. I think the atmosphere gives it a little bit of window, a little breathing room, Jim, and then probably shuts it later on in the week. Don't you think? Isn't that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, exactly right. You know, what's really interesting is now we, as meteorologists, we have to forecast not only where the center goes by the end of the week, which could be in a complete opposite direction of where the moisture goes. So we have to kind of stay focused on that, right?
Yeah, and, you know, we just got the latest advisory, and I should probably get to this, Jim. So we're now a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Really no surprise here. And it is still continuing to move to the southwest, now at 14 miles per hour. And this is a little bit weaker from the previous advisory this morning, but meaningfully, not really. I mean, we're not seeing a complete collapse, and we're not seeing a quick strengthening at all. So it's kind of sort of steady as she goes, moving along a path away from Florida. So Jim was right, though. Even though this is moving away, we are still dealing with plenty of moisture coming into parts of Florida that will sometimes bring showers and gusty winds, even though Eta is moving farther and farther away. its impacts will continually be felt, I think, for maybe the next couple of days overall. Let me go to now the cone. I think I got an update here for you to show you what the latest projections are from the Hurricane Center. And according to the intensity forecast, it doesn't look like that the official numbers are coming in as a hurricane anymore. Now, it's only a 5-mile-per-hour change, so really that doesn't make a whole lot of difference. It's loading up here, guys, but this is the new cone now from the Hurricane Center. Not much change in movement left or right. The timing, basically the same. I'm looking at it for the first time as you are. We're going to be dealing with Eta for a long time. It is going to be likely with us throughout the rest of the week and moving northward eventually and probably revisiting Florida in the northern panhandle. We think perhaps even over the weekend. Good news here. The official forecast now has it weakening like it did before. That's good news. And also the peak intensity here doesn't appear to be reaching into that hurricane status. But let me show you, I'm sort of playing it here by flying by the seat of my pants here, showing you what we've got on the visible satellite pictures. Now, there's some interesting trends here. One is that there's a lot of dry air that is wrapped in this system, which is why maybe one of the reasons why the intensity forecast has come down just a notch. This thing is fighting a hostile environment of a lot of dry air around it. But we also have to watch out for the possibility of thunderstorms collecting near the center in a small little cocoon. If that can happen, if Eta can sort of isolate itself from those hostile surroundings overall, Alex, we could end up dealing with a stronger storm in that window that I talked about from about tomorrow until Wednesday. Just something to watch in the near term. Back to you.
Yeah, we'll no doubt be doing that here. Could be a long haul with this system. We'll certainly be seeing that for sure. All right, what's going on with the rest of the tropics? Because it is still the season, right? And we are dealing with it going all the way through the end of November, at least officially. Of course, you can still find systems even outside of that. And with it being 2020, you just never know. But here we are looking at 2020. Look at all of the different landfalls. East Coast, Gulf Coast, and now with Eta being the first official landfall in Florida for the season. You'd think with all these systems we'd have had one. But no, this is actually the first one with Eta making that landfall there in the Keys. In all 12 landfalling systems here in the U.S., the previous record was actually 9. That was back in 1916. So we've blown that record out of the water. And you can see a couple of other entities to watch. We got Eta there. Then here in the western part or the middle part of the Caribbean, another area to watch. And how about another Invest here in the middle of the Atlantic? More to keep an eye on.
Putting it.
A record-breaking hurricane season continues into the month of November. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten. We have had another landfall this overnight with Tropical Storm Eta in Matacumbe Key, Florida, as a tropical storm with winds at 65 miles per hour. Pressure was at 991 millibars. That brought torrential rain to southeastern Florida, and it brought strong winds as well to south central Florida and into the Keys. By the way, Matacumbe Key, Florida is right in the middle Keys, just to the north and east of Marathon, Florida. You're taking a look at some of the stats there. November the 8th, we've had 28 named storms this season. And oh, by the way, before you tune away, we've got a couple of areas to watch in the Caribbean as well that we're going to highlight too. We're going to be dealing with Eta, though, for at least the duration of this week. You're taking a look at the current information right now, 60-mile-per-hour winds. So we've seen a slight degradation in the storm, but a lot of the activity has been well away from the center and continues to be well away from the center of the storm. So here's a look at the cone. As we project this cone out, what I want you to notice is how each timestamp from today to tonight to tomorrow and into the middle of the week, yes, we start to see that turn back towards the northeast. But here's the thing: right now, it's sort of just playing ping pong, or pinball rather. It's almost like a pinball machine where you've got the buttons and you're trying to press it. There's a high to the northeast, a high to the southwest, and in between that is where Eta is. And it's going to take something much larger to sweep this system out of here. The question question is, how soon does this system get out of here? Let's bring in Dr. Greg Postel with more. He's standing by in the lab with expert analysis. And Dr. Postel, torrential rainfall across southeastern Florida, 16 inches, that is nothing to sneeze at when we've already got surpluses of 8 to 12 inches for the year.
Yeah, you know, Tevin, that's a really good point because we got a ton of rain from Eta over parts of Florida that have seen way above average rainfall for the year and a lot even in the last couple of weeks. So we've seen a ton of flooding, Tevin. And I want to ask you a question. I mean, it seems like the weather where you are, can I get back to Tevin for a second? How intense was it for you when the worst went through your region? I guess that would be overnight last night.
Overnight, of course, you could hear the roaring of the winds. I think some of the peak wind gusts have been near 30, 35 miles an hour at times. But I will admit, from a hurricane season that has been relentless this year, in the year of 2020 and many other things, this is not that bad of a day, or at least of a morning in Key West. But I don't want people to get that sort of feeling of ease because we're not done just yet. There's still some torrential rainfall to occur and some strong squalls that are coming from the southeast, even though the storm is towards the west. So I think overall we fared well. I'm looking around the resort here. They're starting to put the pool chairs back out. And it looks like folks are taking in some of the sun right now, too, while they can.
That's all good news. Thank you very much, Tevin. And let's talk about where we think Eta is going to go. And Tevin talked about the cone a little bit, the updated one from the Hurricane Center. But there's a lot of information that goes into the thinking from the Hurricane Center. They take in a lot of information from all kinds of different sources, different models, and it's very complicated. And there's a lot of uncertainty still left in this forecast. Some of the guidance is just kind of keeping Eta out over the Gulf of Mexico for many days, even beyond this week. So we have to sort of still figure out exactly where this thing's going. But right now it does appear that it is going to be moving again toward the north and probably close in on the northern Gulf Coast there in the Florida Panhandle. But that's not set in stone. Each one of those lines is a different model, and these aren't bad models that you can just throw away and say, aha, you don't know what you're talking about. These have some track record of performance, so we've got to keep those in mind as well. So again, don't let your guard down even in areas farther west than some of the areas that are in the cone at the end of the week. This is what we've got right now, and Tevin was talking about the weather in Key West, 28 mile per hour wind gusts there in between rain bands, but it looks like there's another rain band out here that is about ready to move through the region, and that will bring the winds up a little bit. But the center of circulation is out here over water. That matters a lot because we want to see if indeed this is able to accumulate thunderstorms near that middle part. Dry air has infected Eta for now a long time, and you can even see these great areas of clear sky wrapping all the way in and around this thing. Moats, many of them, where there's precipitation-free air. But in the middle, if this thing can find a little bit of seclusion from that, then maybe it's got a chance because the overall environment is hostile. There's no doubt about that. This thing has been captured by an upper trough, a dip in the jet stream that has brought dry air all the way in, as I just showed you. But we have to watch out for what happens on the very small scale to see if indeed we're going to get some strengthening out of it. Hurricane hunters are in there right now. Right now, they are not finding that. So that is one of the reasons why the intensity in the latest advisory has come down to 60 from 65. And we'll see if that trend continues. I don't see anything that suggests it's going to immediately strengthen. But we have to watch out because when you forecast that dry air out and where we think Eta is going to go, there may still be a little bit of wiggle room here, a little bit of a window where it's got some opportunity and some moisture to sort of seclude itself from those otherwise extremely arid surroundings, which would kill it off quickly. That might happen in the Tuesday to Wednesday time frame, Tevin, but you know, if the Hurricane Center forecast track is right, moving it northward, it does eventually get swamped by dry air, and that is why, in part, that the Hurricane Center's official forecast weakens this thing as it moves northward end of the week. Back to you.
The roosters are crowing out here in Key West, Dr. Griffo. I didn't know if you were going to hear it or not, man. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, Everything is almost back to normal here in Key West. Occasionally some little baby ones do come through and they sort of make their way into the sun. They're looking for some food, but you can't quite feed them because they are, one with nature. But anyway, I got a quick question for you. In terms of the rainfall, 1.5 feet of rain, how atypical is that from a tropical entity, especially one that never really had a good presentation to begin with?
Well, those are really good questions. It's not unusual to find over 1 foot of rain with a landfalling tropical system, especially one that's moving at the pace Eta is moving. And you might think, okay, well, it wasn't really that strong in terms of wind. But this is one of the things that, you talk about, we all talk about, that you don't need a strong system wind-wise to get a lot of rain. That is actually pretty common. Some of the most prolific rainmakers in our recent history have been from basically systems that have weakened on landfall and just sit there and spun down. So you don't really need a strong system wind-wise to get a ton of rain. That's a great question, Tevin.
All right, Dr. Posto, thanks for that. And speaking of some of that rain, that led to flash flooding overnight and early into the morning hours in southeastern Florida, places like Broward and Miami-Dade County, where we saw some of the heaviest precip. If we take a look at the maps, I can unfortunately let you know we've got more rain still to come here. The good news is the further west we can get Eta, the better, because a lot of the rain, even though it is still on the eastern side, we want to get that core well away from South Florida, where we've already seen the heavy rainfall. And that we are doing. You can tell we're starting to close things up here in Miami-Dade and also in Broward and Fort Lauderdale, where, man, oh man, if you saw social media last night in Fort Lauderdale and Miami-Dade, there were cars. If you know anything about South Florida, very expensive and exotic cars driving through flooded roads. I saw a yellow Lamborghini driving through. Someone tweeted me and said it was a yellow submarine driving through some flooded roads. We do not advise driving into flooded roadways, by the way. Some of the rainfall amounts in the past 2 days, as Dr. Posto and I have alluded to, you can see that area near I-75 close to a foot to 1.5 feet of rain. Now, outside of that, there were large areas near Homestead and the Upper Keys that saw between 5 and 8 inches. So for that reason, the grounds are still saturated. It won't take much to disturb the atmosphere. So we do have flood watches posted at least through Tuesday evening, but some of those may be extended not only in time but also in location, depending on the eventual track of Eta. Through tomorrow morning, there's a high chance for flash flooding, or a likely chance rather of flash flooding, where you see that yellow along the east coast of Florida. And then the other thing that we have to monitor too with tropical entities are tornadoes. Rather, you get a couple of water spouts that come on shore. Those are tornadoes. So I know they may be appeasing to look at and appealing to the eye, but they are still dangerous. We don't have to worry about those right now in Key West, but there are some eventually that could spin up. I would say also near Marco Island, where Jim Cantori is, that's not out of the question either, in Lee and Collier County, due to some of the shear in the atmosphere and also that land friction interaction. So here's a look at the future radar. I told you we're not done just yet. Eta is not out of here. But even, Alex, beyond Eta, unfortunately, there are a couple of more tropical entities out there or areas to watch that 2020 is just going to be one for the record books. Already is, and it looks like we're going to continue that trend.
Yeah, Tevin, you said it. Yeah, we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. Thanks so much. We'll be checking back with you there. Now, one driver in Broward County, Florida, is in the hospital now and fighting for his life. Our Kelly Cass reports firefighters rescued the man from a canal in Lauderhill with not a second to spare.
Fierce winds approaching 50 miles per hour. 10+ inches of rain. In the chaos of Eta, one Broward County driver ended up in a canal.
Firefighters went into the canal, into the vehicle, broke out the glass, pulled the driver out, began CPR, got the driver to the hospital, and he has since regained pulses.
Authorities say the driver, who's now in critical condition, probably couldn't distinguish where the pavement ended and the water began.
You can't tell the difference between the parking lot, where the grass and the canal start. The vehicle most definitely it was dark out here, drove into the canal without knowing the difference.
Trees standing in saturated soil, easy targets for Eta. One falling tree slightly injured a 9-year-old boy.
Our crews used some cutting tools to cut some of the branches away that allowed for the family to safely evacuate.
Streets in Fort Lauderdale underwater. The city put 23 vacuum trucks in flood zones. Pumps simply couldn't keep up with the deluge.
The streets are like rivers. It's just everywhere the ground is saturated. Once the ground becomes saturated, there's really no place for the water to go.
Fort Lauderdale showing a 22-inch rainfall surplus for 2020. 18 inches at Miami. And I should remind you, that is actually before Eta arrived. So we'll see those totals go even higher than that. Well, here's what's going on when it comes to Eta and some of those winds at this time. You can see from Fort Myers down towards Marco Island, generally looking at 15 to close to 20 mile an hour sustained winds, but gusts are getting a little higher than that. Naples right now gusting up over 25 miles per hour, and there's a buoy offshore with a gust right now that sits right around 43 miles per hour. Heading down through the Keys, you can see our wind shear Marathon. You're now up close to 30 miles per hour with your wind gusts. Key West, 21 mile per hour sustained wind. Your gust is now at 28 miles per hour. You can see some of the other reports that have been coming in. Our Card Sound Bridge there, one of the reports showing up close to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. Grassy Key, about a 43 mile per hour wind showing up there. So we've certainly seen some very, very gusty conditions here, and we'll continue to stay quite breezy. And in particular, when we start to see some of those rains come on through, you'll see a downpour and then also gusty conditions within that rain. So watch out for that. Then, of course, we have to watch out what's going on in the waters. Rip current risk for the east and west coast having to deal with that. A high risk here along the east coast in those red areas, and you can see the moderate risk here for us along the west coast. And even as you work your way back up towards a spot like Apalachicola, the risk for rip currents exists there. So getting into the waters, not going to be a recommended thing. The wind associated with this thing is pretty expansive. I mean, all the way up towards Jacksonville, winds are going to be a gusty 35, maybe 40 mile per hour wind gusts. Can't rule that out this afternoon. And even as we get into the evening overnight period, still breezy conditions are going to be expected here for us. We'll see by tomorrow afternoon, West Palm Beach, 25, maybe even 30 mile per hour winds showing up there for you, with Miami right in that range as well. So a breezy scenario as we see the main center of the circulation there well on off towards the south and the west there for us. Continuing into Tuesday evening, again, still finding breezy conditions here for us across a good chunk of the Sunshine State. Now, Fort Lauderdale has been clobbered by rain and wind by Eta. City saw 5.93 inches of rain. That was on Sunday. We also had a 66 mile per hour wind gust last night. You can expect some tropical storm conditions throughout the day, and not just Broward County, but across South Florida and the Florida Keys. Of course, we got Tevin that is live in Key West with some of those conditions here. Tevin, how things faring for you? I know the sun is starting to shine a little brighter at this time.
Yeah, Alex, minus the wind, we have a great morning stacked up for you here in Key West, Florida. You did mention some of those breezy conditions. We're getting winds close to about 22 miles an hour for some of the strongest gusts coming out of the south and southeast. So keep in mind that onshore push of wind will drive a lot of this water and will start to cause some convergence. So as the water from the rainfall wants to drain out, it's going to meet that water from the ocean and from the Florida Strait. So it won't necessarily drain out as easily as it typically would on a non-windy day. So you do have that as a concern despite the abundant sunshine that we're seeing right now. But also, you still got rain and thunderstorms in the forecast in Key West. Let's go ahead and pull that up. The next 5 days, rain today, tomorrow, into Wednesday. It looks like by Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, we start to scatter our chances out, so it's not going to be as prominent or as impactful as it would today and tomorrow compared to the second half of the week. Let's take a look at the future radar, because that really tells a story on how hit or miss some of these storms will be, because if you think about the Keys, this long strand of barrier islands here, you've really got some intermittent showers from the upper Keys to the middle Keys by the early evening hours, and even to the southern Keys as well, where we are. So all along Highway 1, if you happen to travel that stretch of roadway today, do know you'll have to take it nice and slow because of some of the stronger storms coming through, but also the strong winds. If you've ever driven a car over a bridge, you do know that the winds do typically get a little bit more rocky and impactful as you're driving your car. So keep the hands on 10 and 2. Maybe take it a couple of ticks below the odometer than you typically would as well. So here's a look at Tuesday. We're still seeing rain and thunderstorms there. Tracking Tropical Storm Eta. This storm is not done by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to meander in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Where it goes beyond that, we've got more next.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
Welcome into sunny South Florida. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten. We're live in Key West, Florida, the southernmost point in the continental U.S. Guess what? Yes, there's actually a markation that shows you how far away we are from Cuba. That's about 80 miles or so here in South Florida, right through the Florida Straits. And to get you there, of course, we do have the water. We've also got the horizon here. You can see how the clouds are stacked, but they're not vertically stacked. So overall, we are starting to see blue sky come in and that drier air move in. And that drier air has really limited the amount of rainfall that we've seen here in Key West. In fact, just by maybe about 10 to 15 miles or so to the south, that's where some of the heaviest precip occurred, and thank goodness it was over water and not over land, or we'd be talking about a deluge of water we're trying to drain back out into the Florida Strait. So yes, we saw about an inch to an inch and a half of rainfall here in the southern Keys, but portions of southeastern Florida, Alex, as you know, between 10 and 16 inches of rainfall in about 48 hours. They are still under those flood alerts at this hour. Alex.
Yeah, lots and lots of rain. Meanwhile, we're following the other big weather story. That includes the November warmth. And it certainly doesn't feel like November in a place like Chicago, and it hasn't for quite some time. We've hit at least 70 degrees the last 5 days, with 2 record highs that have been set in that span. And you'll be nearing the mid-70s for a high today. You got to remember, our average high for this time of the year, the lower 50s. So we're well above that. And again, we have the possibility for more records to fall. In fact, look at this map here for today. Concentrated here, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, into parts of the Northeast, a few scattered here into portions of the South. But again, well above where we should be. Look at some of these values. Louisville, 80 for the day. The record is 77. Working back over towards St. Louis, you've got upper 70s expected there. Again, very, very close to record territory. And moving into the Northeast as well, Binghamton's a spot that could break the record by a good 5 degrees. All the way up towards Burlington. 70s expected there, and again, breaking records. Doesn't stop today. Tomorrow, we keep that going. More areas across the Midwest into the Southeast. Let's take you there. Raleigh is a spot that could be within record territory. 81 is the record. We're going for 80 for you. Back over towards Knoxville. 78 is the record, and we're forecasting 79 degrees. And that's what we've got around Macon as well for tomorrow, with your record of right around 81. And moving northbound yet again, more potential record highs. Chicago, pretty decent bet that happens. The record 71. We're going for 75 degrees. So very, very mild conditions here for us in parts of the east. Very spring-like in these areas. But let's go ahead and bring in Dr. Postel to focus in on what we're dealing with here. Dr. Postel, some of these areas are dealing with some of this warmth and storms. Others, a bit of a chill and snow.
Yeah, there are lots of places in the upper Midwest right now, Alex, that are not as warm as Macon, Georgia, especially if you look at Fargo, North Dakota, Pierre, South Dakota, Bismarck, 20s. But once you cross that front on the other side of it, look at that, mid-60s. Minneapolis, 65 degrees. Even Duluth on this November morning, 54 degrees. So on the warm side, we're in record territory on the warmth, and on the cold side, it is definitely winter-like with temperatures in the 20s. That frontal zone will begin to move eastward today and probably continue to move eastward overnight and tomorrow, but an area of low pressure will develop along it. And when that happens, which is pretty common, you get cold air drawn in on the backside of it a bit more effectively. So that cold air is going to be sliding south and southeastward, and that will give us a bit more of an opportunity, I think, for accumulating snow, let's say in parts of eastern Nebraska, Iowa, and also in Minnesota. This is the forecast for today. Find your spot on the map. It looks like southeastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin and Iowa, mostly rain. Probably also the case tonight, but then things shift a bit farther to the east. You can see that transition from rain to rain and or mixed with snow to all snow take place tomorrow as that low pressure system moves through and then brings that cold air from west to east, and that by tomorrow night, there may be a reasonable amount here of accumulating snow in eastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin. Alex.
All right, Dr. Postel, and then, of course, out ahead of all that, we've got that tropical moisture that is really going to help to feed the rain that we see over the next few days for parts of the southeast, all the way up into portions of the Northeast as well. Again, it's tropical moisture that we're going to have to deal with, so that could lead to some issues when it comes to some flooding. There's Eta here as we work our way through the week. Potentially they're still in the Gulf of Mexico, and then on the backside of this area of high pressure, again, the flow helping to drive up some of this moisture. So we do have rainfall that'll be pretty widespread over the next several days across the southeast into the mid-Atlantic. European model here shows you the amount of rain that we'll see over the next 5 days, and it has a little area here, northern Florida, southeast Georgia into South Carolina, some pretty hefty totals. Now remember, the European model brings Eta in, and so along that track path has some heavier rains associated with it there. GFS model does not bring Eta into this zone, so you see much lighter when it comes to the amount of rain, but it does have quite a bit of moisture with the front coming in from the east, and that's going to help to bring us a little bit more rainfall here across sections of North Carolina, at least according to the GFS. So some heavy downpours, possible flooding. We'll have to keep a track on that. Here's what it looks like for tomorrow. Rain showers and a few storms. Then by Wednesday, we'll see that expanding even more into portions of the Northeast. So gray skies and rain, something that we'll be dealing with. The other thing we'll deal with, Eta, tracking that next.
Tropical Storm Eta, the 28th named storm of the 2020 hurricane season, the 12th storm to make landfall this season as well. Welcome back into the Weather Channel as we continue to track Tropical Storm Eta. 60-mile-per-hour winds right now. The storm in its center towards the west into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, but on the east side of the storm, still seeing torrential rainfall and significant downpours at this hour. Let's get you to the latest on what we know with Tropical Storm Eta. It's already caused a lot of damage out there. Eta made landfall in lower Matacumbe Key late last night, right around 11 p.m. with 65-mile-per-hour winds. Most in-person schools in South Florida, those are closed today due to Eta, including Miami-Dade, Broward, Monroe, Collier, and Lee County. So you're talking about some of the largest counties in the state. Some districts are doing virtual learning today instead, those that do potentially have internet. And the death toll in Central America likely won't be known for days. As catastrophic flooding, landslides, and mudslides as of now have been the cause of at least 118 deaths. But unfortunately, that number is expected to rise. And keep in mind, there are several dozens of people still missing in the debris, in the rubble of those mudslides and those landslides as well. Tropical Storm Eta was once a catastrophic and powerful hurricane Eta that impacted Central America, and from there we saw the torrential downpours. It brought nearly 30 inches of rain in some spots of Guatemala and Honduras. So that sort of showed us what it could potentially do here in the lower 48, and then that came to fruition in southeastern Florida, where we saw close to 15, 16 inches of rain in less than 2 days' time. And keep in mind, this is falling on saturated ground where several spots across the southern half of the state are in the surplus, so they have more rain than they typically would in any given year. And this isn't by a little bit, folks. This is by a long shot, some 8 to 12 inches. So we've got saturated grounds here, and we're still seeing very heavy rainfall move through the spine of the state and now the western corner, or the southwestern corner of the state. In terms of Eta, we've got 60-mile-per-hour winds, but this storm is not done just yet. If you take a look at the projected cone here, sort of like an unwelcome visitor that shows up during the holidays, or that relative that you have and they stick around. I know Thanksgiving's coming up and you're like, how do I get my mother-in-law to the house? This is that relative. It will be in the forecast for the next 5 days, all the way into Friday, potentially, Dr. Greg Postel, into the latter part of the week and into the weekend, too. So a stout storm system, no less, and then a lot of heavy rainfall still to come.
Yeah, and a potential return visit to Florida, as you said, by the end of the week or next weekend. Thanks very much, Tevin. Now let's go to that what's inside that cone and what's going on in the thinking for why it looks the way it does. Well, when you run a lot of simulations with the different models, you get a different result. But there's a whole bunch of them that are kind of right down essentially the middle of this cone. I'm not showing all of them here, but I just want to point out there are other options here that keep Eta out over the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, weaken it with time down the road, but still keep it out there. long past this week and for a while. So there is some opportunity for this thing to behave a bit differently and maybe end up over here. We just don't know yet. You're going to have to tune in a little bit because there's a lot of uncertainty with Eta, with the steering currents not particularly strong and going one direction or another. I'm going to go back to that graphic because I want to show you what the current conditions are like over South Florida right now. We're getting winds of 20 to 30, gusts to 40 in some spots. When those rain showers come in like they are moving through Naples and just south of Punta Gorda, we're going to get wind gusts probably over 40 in some spots. But the weather behind that toward the east will improve overall. That will be the theme today. The center of circulation is way out here over water, and it's something that we have to watch. Because right now it's been totally infiltrated by a lot of dry air at all kinds of altitudes coming all the way in. You can see these almost clear slots wrapping their way in. That has been sort of responsible for the, ill appearance of Eta for the last couple of days. But, we have to watch just in case there may be a small little region inside of this overall circulation that could find a bit of a home away from that dry air. And we'll see if indeed that does happen, because if it were to seclude itself from some of that really dry air in its surroundings, maybe it's got a shot at overperforming on the intensity part of it. But we'll watch that very carefully. The extremely dry air is very pronounced. It's pretty broad. It's widespread. It's the overall environment that Eta is in. And that is, again, responsible for us finding really not much of a tropical storm, so to speak. I mean, the hurricane hunters are slicing and dicing their way all the way through here and finding 50 to 60 mile per hour winds. But I do want to forecast out this dry air to show you that Tuesday, Wednesday, if this thing is going to strengthen, it's got that little bit of a window. If it's over here, according to the Hurricane Center, maybe it's sequestered enough from that dry air to fend it off and strengthen a bit. But I think overall, no matter where it ends up, in, out, or the cone, it's going to be swamped by dry air and weaken the end of the week. We'll be right back.
Anytime we talk about tropical storms and hurricanes, well, of course, we always give you the nomenclature or the status or the classification. Is it a tropical storm? Is it a category 1 or 2 or 3? All of that to say that's essentially a measurement of winds via the Saffir-Simpson scale. But with tropical storm Eta, it was the rainfall that was the name of the game, and it came down in boatloads and buckets at times. Just checking out some of the latest reports, near 16.5 inches of rain near I-75 in southeastern Florida, and also near Sunshine Ranches and Southwest Ranches. So that just lets you know how much rain we saw with Tropical Storm Eta, and we still continue to see rain. In fact, portions of southeastern Florida throughout Miami-Dade County and Broward County under flash flood warnings at least until 11 o'clock. So another 15 to 25 minutes or so, and you'll notice the rain has subsided, but we saw so much rainfall in a short amount of time overnight that the flash flooding, the roads are still wet in some spots. And then, of course, you've got to take into account the tide cycle and then the onshore push of wind. It's all coming from the east, so the water can't drain and trickle back out into the Atlantic as it typically would. We've zoomed out to show you the wider view. We'll zoom back in now. You can see some of that 16, 17 inches of rainfall, some of those reports I was talking about. Those are on the higher end of the threshold, but even outside of Fort Lauderdale, 5 to 8 inches of rain. South of Miami-Dade and Homestead, also some 5 to 8 inches of rain, too. Flood watchers are posted through Tuesday evening, so essentially if we get 1 or 2 more showers, they do contain tropical moisture. They do have higher precipitable water values, essentially saying the atmosphere is loaded, it is charged up, despite the dry air that we have entrained to the core of Eta on the west side of Florida and in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. Here's a look at the flash flooding through Tuesday morning here. Again, likely anywhere along, I would say, from Vero Beach all the way down south into West Palm and also Key Largo and the Upper Keys. And one more thing, Alex, the winds, as you know, and you're about to talk about, they can also cause waterspouts and tornadoes, too. So a multitude of hazards, even though Tropical Storm Eta is now out to sea.
Absolutely. That's one thing we'll be watching for as we work our way on through our day, along with some of the gusty conditions, indeed, no doubt about it. Meanwhile, let's talk about how gusty the winds are right now and creeping up a bit, and that's what's going to happen, particularly when we start to get into some of the downpours. You can see that streaming here across the southwest part of the state. Look at Naples now. You've seen that wind creep right back up, gusting now up around 36 miles per hour. That's as a little bit of rain has moved right on in. Fort Myers, you're sustained at 18, gusting to 26. There's a buoy offshore here. with a 34-mile-per-hour sustained wind, and your gusts there, at least at that buoy, is getting up over 40 miles per hour. So still some strong winds to deal with here across southwest portions of Florida, down around the Keys. We see some of those winds as well. Deer Key, not too bad, 7-mile-per-hour wind with gusts close to 20. But what's going to happen is as you bring in some of the rain, and right now it looks like a shower has moved right over the Marathon area, 20-mile-per-hour sustained wind with the gust at 36. So again, it's all going to be certainly highly dependent on where some of those rain bands try to set up there for us. Some of the wind reports coming in here for us. Teetable Key, 39-mile-per-hour wind gust showing up there. Grassy Key, over 40-mile-per-hour wind gust. So again, it has been a bit on the gusty side and will still remain pretty breezy as we work our way on through our day. We'll certainly have to keep an eye on things. Again, currently across South Florida, generally 15, 20-mile-an-hour sustained winds, but some higher gusts within some of that rain. I'll just work our way back towards the Keys. Check in on Tevin, where we do see a little bit of sun out there for us at this time.
Oh, Alex, this is almost a postcard day here in Key West, at least in terms of what we're seeing right now throughout the midday hours. But I want folks to know, if you're out today, you're in the lawn chair, you are basking in the sunshine, don't think it's going to stay that way the entire day, because it will not. This is not a textbook tropical system. I know it doesn't look like a strong tropical system, but it does still have strong storms embedded within it, almost subtropical like characteristics at times. All that to say, if you look at the forecast for the next 5 days here in Key West, we've got rain and thunderstorms today and tomorrow. Scattered chances for you Wednesday through Friday. And also notice the winds. They're still strong, too, out of the south and southeast throughout the week, varying somewhere in that direction. Between 15 and 20 miles per hour. Some of the strongest gusts at about 25 to 30 miles per hour. The rain does continue today through the midday hour. Again, intermittent showers at best. I don't think anyone is just going to get rained on the entire time. There may be 1 or 2 locations in the Middle Keys, but overall there are breaks or slots of drier air that does provide a break, does provide the nice sunshine today, and the cloud coverage as well periodically too. So if you look into Tuesday morning, for any kids that are trying to go to school on Tuesday, I think we've got more rain in store for you. So even though the storm is well to the west, this is quite odd how much shear there is in the environment and how east loaded the storm is. We may be looking at more than an inch or so of rainfall between Miami and Homestead, and places that unfortunately just got inundated Sunday night and earlier this morning. Maybe more of the same as we approach Tuesday too. Let's talk about the west coast, the southwestern coast, and Lee and Collier County throughout Sanibel Island and Marco Island and Fort Myers. They too, Dr. Postel, have rain and thunderstorms for a majority of the week.
Yeah, they will, Kevin. Now it's time to switch gears for your cold and flu tracker. Right now across the country, most areas are dealing with, thankfully, minimal cold and flu activity, but some places, like for example in Iowa and Indiana, are dealing with some low to moderate levels of flu activity. But overall looking good, but we know that's going to change. Make sure you get your flu shot and pay attention to all the latest updates on the flu season upcoming. We also going to talk about much more about Eta and the rest of the weather that's important across the country when we come up after the break.
All right, come closer to your TV screens, your cell phone screens, and your computer screens, perhaps. New video into us. This is as Tropical Storm Eta blasted the Florida Keys. This is video from Key Largo. Look at that water covering the ground. Strong winds and heavy downpours we're seeing across the Keys as Eta made landfall in lower Matacumbe Key. The storm also brought more than 6 inches of rain, causing flooding in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Monroe counties. A flood watch is in effect in South Florida until tomorrow evening. So what that means is It's not a flash flood watch, it's a flood watch. It's a longer duration event. So this isn't something that will happen in 1 or 2 hours time. It could happen in 1 or 2 hours time, but it's more likely to be extended out over the course of time. Welcome back into the Weather Channel as we continue to track Tropical Storm Eta, the 28th named storm of this historic hurricane season, the 12th storm to make landfall, also setting a record. Back in 1916, they had 9 landfalls. This year, much like 2020 has been, on par for the course here, we've had a lot of records broken, not just inside of hurricane season as well. Here in Key West, what's really breaking through right now is the sunshine. I mean, abundant. It's been over the last almost 2 hours now. There are some clouds back there, but most of those are starting to give way, too, to some of the drier air that is spilling in. I don't want folks to think we're done with the rain, because we're not. This is the direction towards the south and southeast. A lot of the flow is from that direction, and so are the winds that have gusted near 25 miles an hour, closer to 30 miles per hour today. So as we go throughout the course of the day today, there are more bands or more squalls that will bring heavy rain, maybe even a strong gust of wind or two near tropical storm force. But Dr. Posel, overall, the storm is to the west. Its impacts, though, on the east.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because Eta is moving away from Florida, but I think there are going to be rounds of rain coming in associated with Eta for a couple of more days, and I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Right now, the latest advisory has it at 60 miles per hour, a long way out there over the Gulf of Mexico. There's Key West and there's Miami. So we have a system that is thankfully moving away, and the weather will overall improve over Florida today, but rounds of rain showers, as I said, will still be working their way in from the Atlantic over the next couple of days. And one of the reasons why is because we're not getting rid of Eta anytime soon. I'd love to say we could, but we can't. This is the official forecast from the Hurricane Center, moving it back toward the north and maybe making yet another appearance to North Florida very end of the week and early next weekend. But the good news here, and this has been a consistent theme of this forecast, is that it is expected to weaken the longer it stays out over the water and the farther north it moves. So if it, let's say, moves toward North Florida, the odds are that it will be weakening along the way, even from where it is right now. That's excellent news. Right now, we are dealing with a system, as I said, that's moving away, but still some rain showers along the Florida southwest coast. Winds are generally 20 to 30 miles per hour. Big waves, rip currents, coastal flooding, still a possibility. And overall, when you look inside of this thing, it's not healthy at all. It's got dry slots wrapping in it all over the place. In other words, there's clear air coming in from all kinds of different angles at it. And so we're going to see this thing struggle on the intensity scale for a little while. If it can isolate itself from all that dry air, we can talk about that later. Maybe it's got a shot. But the other thing I want to mention is that there is sort of the, I would say, whatever's left of the core of Eta there. There's a big slug of rain out here that is kind of moving this direction. And some of the guidance suggests that, rain and some gusty winds could still be a part of the forecast for Florida, Georgia, and areas farther to the north, and inland as well, Alex, over the next couple of days. So as much as we want to get rid of Eta, we can't. It won't go away.
Yeah, like we can't get rid of 2020, right?
Right.
This is just nuts. All right, thanks so much, Dr. Postel. Meanwhile, we're dealing with, of course, the season, which has been very, very busy, right? Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of landfalling tropical cyclones this year. East Coast, Gulf Coast as well. And then now with Eta here, the first landfall this season in Florida, which is crazy to think about how many we've seen. 12 in total here for us. The previous record was 9 back in 1916. So blowing that out of the water. All right, so we've got Eta. Then as you head south and east, another area to watch here in the Caribbean, and then there's an invest in the middle of the Atlantic, which may be coming close to becoming the next system here. But let's focus in a little closer to home, where the National Hurricane Center is giving this about a 50% chance of developing as a bit of a wave that's moving through the central portions of the Caribbean. And the chances here, again, in this yellow hatched area for that to try to develop into our next tropical cyclone, we'll certainly see and keep an eye on that. And then we have Invest, a 97L. Again, this is way out here in the Atlantic. You can see there are the Azores, but they're giving it about a 70% chance of developing into a system as it continues to march off towards the east of it. Looks like it'll generally be moving south of the Azores, maybe trying to make a run for the Canary Islands. So again, the season goes all the way through the end of November, and we could certainly see that going even outside of that range too.
Sharing.
storm Eta made landfall at about 11 o'clock last night, and there was a lot of damage throughout the Upper Keys with a lot of tree debris down, some branches down.
All right, welcome back into the Weather Channel's continuing live coverage here of Tropical Storm Eta, really putting down the rainfall in and around South Florida from Miami to right here in Fort Lauderdale. This is one of the hardest hit locations. The good news is it's not raining, and we don't expect a lot of rain today. The worst certainly is over with the rainfall. However, we were to get a brief shower, it's only going to cause this water to only stay up and maybe even rise a little bit. I want to show you down this street. This is the Melrose Park neighborhood of Fort Lauderdale, kind of right on the border of Plantation and Fort Lauderdale. We're about 4 miles east of downtown, about 6 or 7 miles from the beach, okay? This neighborhood, the only way to get in is with a SWAT artillery vehicle, one of those high ones. The local law enforcement here doesn't even have enough vehicles to take their own cars in just because of how deep the water is. And we also know there are numerous homes in this neighborhood, which is a pretty large, it's several blocks, guys. There's a whole stretch of homes that have taken on water. And people are trapped. There were a lot of RADA rescues. We'll get updated information on how many calls Broward County Sheriff's Office as well as Fort Lauderdale Police had to receive overnight last night as people had their cars stranded. I mean, driving all around town. It's not just one little pocket. There's numerous areas, side streets, that look just like this behind me. I want to take you down this street just to show you what this part of the road looks like. Now, the good news is some of the more main highways, if we bump up just here a little bit, Craig, our photog, kind of showing you around the region. Notice how the main thoroughfares are a little bit elevated. So getting around, at least on the main highways, is okay. But it's all of those neighborhoods that we run into problems. We actually just saw a mailman go down here and deliver the mail. So they're hard at work. I will say pretty much people are staying home. They're stuck and there's no need. There's no school, and a lot of offices and city government units are closed for good reason. So people pretty much are off the roads. A lot of dangerous intersections right now and dangerous driving conditions. All right, so that's Eta here in Fort Lauderdale. Similar scenes in Miami. Let's get the latest here on the nuts and bolts. It made landfall. If you're just joining us this morning, we had an official landfall last night at Lower Macomb Key in Florida. That's kind of right there in the middle Keys, south of Key Largo and to the east of Key West. The radar showing you a lot of the action now well to the west of South Florida. The rain exiting Miami and parts of Broward counties. That's good news because this is where the heaviest rain has been all along. Not to say we're done completely. We may get some more bands firing up, but it's not going to be like what we dealt with yesterday. And still, when you look at the past 2-3 days, the rainfall totals here are prolific. You know, in parts of Fort Lauderdale, South Broward County, Davie, Plantation, we had totals nearing a foot, and we did have an official report of 16.1 inches in Miramar, Florida. That's just south of Pembroke Pines in northern Miami-Dade County. That was with that band that set up overnight earlier this morning and really put down the rainfall totals. So unbelievable amounts. People here have lived in Fort Lauderdale, Miami for 20 plus years, and they have never seen a rain event like they just experienced. Unbelievable amounts. Usually neighborhoods that don't usually flooded. And usually when we get flooding, we get a lot of street flooding, Dr. Postel, but very rarely do we get the water from a flood event to actually enter the homes. But that's just what you have. This is not river flooding. This is essentially, you know, too much water in too short a period of time. And this is what we urge you not to do. Don't drive in this. We see way too many cars that are stalled, Dr. Postel, and you really have no idea how deep that. I mean, look at that car there in the distance. Now, the problem is these people, they're stuck in their neighborhood. They're trying to get out. Some of these people have to go to work because they're essential workers, and yet they're trying to, you know, see if their car can make it, but that's way too high, way too close for comfort.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand why we keep, why that is done over and over again, despite the obvious dangers that come with that. Chris, thank you very much. I mean, we're going to keep seeing those. Just to stay there, you know, if they need help, I'm sure you'll be on the way and rescue them. But you know what? Let's have a look at Eta, because we really still don't know where it's going. The cone here by the Hurricane Center is sort of the standard one that's issued, and it looks sort of inflated. That's not because there's a different cone. It's just that it's a slower movement of the storm, so it's kind of compacting everything a little bit. But each one of those lines is a different simulation from another model, and there's a lot of options that are still on the table, some even outside of the cone. So there's a lot of uncertainty on exactly where Eta is going to go, but we do know it's not going to be going anywhere fast. It's going to be kind of hanging out over the Gulf of Mexico for much of this week, and that's a problem. We don't really want that, and that means we'll at least have to deal with it for a few more days at a minimum. This is what we've got in terms of weather across parts of South and Central Florida. We've got generally 20 to 30 mile per hour winds, even outside of any rain showers. When those rain showers move through, let's say in Naples and Punta Gorda and areas in between, when some of those heavier bursts of rain come in, we're going to get gusts above that, probably closer to 40 in some spots. But the center of Eta is here and moving away. So step by step, the weather will improve today across Florida for the most part. We'll still be dealing with some showers that come in out the Atlantic from time to time, though. This is what I'm watching right now. This is sort of a very small and zoomed in area of what may be developing, sort of the new part to watch for Eta. In the big picture, dry air has come in and really infested and infiltrated the circulation. So it's not really appropriate or the right way to think about Eta as that very large system that we once saw. Now all of it is happening in a very small, remote little area in the middle that is trying to block itself off from that dry air penetration. The hurricane hunters are in there right now. The airplane is right there. All that line there is showing you the track that they've taken, and they're going to be coming back in the center over and over again. And we'll find out if indeed those thunderstorms that are developing in that very small area near the middle will actually translate into an increase in strength. We don't know if that's the case. But again, the big picture is inhospitable for Eta. That is pretty obvious. A big upper trough has captured this thing. Dry air has circulated in lots of different regions. All kinds of dry slots left and right that are killing thunderstorms in the big picture. But what happens in the middle, in that very small, remote little cocoon, matters. And there may be some opportunity over the next few days to find some room for strengthening. Here's the NHC track right about there on Wednesday morning. So between now and Wednesday, let's say Eta is over here. If it is, we don't know, but let's say it's here. Chris, it could be somewhat divorced or isolated from some of the drier air around it that could otherwise kill it off. So we might see some strengthening in the near term, but in the long term, this is my last graphic, in the long term, that dry air is coming in, and no matter where Eta ends up, it looks like it's doomsday for it toward the end of the week and the weekend with much drier air and stronger wind shear coming in. Chris.
All right, yeah, thanks for that update there. Very unique storm, Eta, certainly taking on a lot of unique features that we haven't seen so much this season with a tropical cyclone. But still impactful nonetheless. You saw the rainfall. That's what this will be remembered as. We had wind damage, and there overall 40-some thousand customers at its peak were without power, which when you give the general South Florida population of over 7-8 million people, that's insignificant. So most people didn't lose power. I do see there in the water, you see one of those power lines kind of draped down. This is another reason why we tell you not to go in the water. That could be a charged line, and that could certainly be a dangerous, electrocution. So that's something we want to avoid. Hopefully the power crews turn that off in many cases. Let's talk about the rainfall still to come and how much we have already seen. I mean, this is a historic storm, certainly for Miami-Dade, Broward, even Palm Beach counties. We had 6, 7, nearly 8+ inches, and unofficial totals of over 16 inches in parts of inland Broward and also inland Miami-Dade counties. You can see that huge swath over the last 3 days, most of which fell yesterday alone. And remember, we came into this event with a huge surplus. I just got the new flash flood warning alert on my phone. They keep extending it now expected to remain in effect through 3 p.m. this afternoon. The water here is very different than a flash flood situation you would think of, say, in the southeast, in the Midwest, or in the mountains where you have rising rivers and then quick drop. Here it's more the grounds are so saturated, the drainage system is so clogged, the canals, the ponds, the lakes. that it takes a while for that water to go down. So it's steadily, slowly receding. As long as we don't get any more rain, the water will slowly go down, but it's going to take some time. Let's toss it in now with more on the effects of wind and other parts of Eta with Alex.
Indeed, Chris. Going to be watching those effects here as we head through the day with some of the gusty conditions. But I'll tell you, one driver in Broward County, Florida, there is in the hospital now fighting for his life. Our Kelly Cass reports firefighters rescued the man from a canal in Lauderhill with not a second to spare.
Fierce winds approaching 50 miles per hour. 10+ inches of rain. In the chaos of Eta, one Broward County driver ended up in a canal.
Firefighters went into the canal, into the vehicle, broke out the glass, pulled the driver out, began CPR, got the driver to the hospital, and he has since regained pulses.
Authorities say the driver, who's now in critical condition, probably couldn't distinguish where the pavement ended and the water began.
You can't tell the difference between the parking lot, where the grass and the canal start. The vehicle most definitely it was dark out here, drove into the canal without knowing the difference.
Trees standing in saturated soil, easy targets for Eta. One falling tree slightly injured a 9-year-old boy.
Our crews used some cutting tools to cut some of the branches away that allowed for the family to safely evacuate.
Streets in Fort Lauderdale, underwater. The city put 23 vacuum trucks in flood zones. Pumps simply couldn't keep up with the deluge.
The streets are like rivers. It's just everywhere the ground is saturated. Once the ground becomes saturated, there's really no place for the water to go.
Well, Fort Lauderdale showing a 22-inch rainfall surplus here for the year, 18-inch surplus at Miami, and that is before Eta arrived. So yeah, a lot of rain here across the southern portion of the state, and we're still finding that coming down along with some of the wind. Here's a look at what we're seeing right now with the winds. Fort Myers, 20-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Gusts are getting up around 25 there. Naples, last check there, we were seeing gusts getting up over 30. And again, you see some of the rain coming on through, and when you get in some of those heavier downpours, you can get into some gustier winds as well. So that's going to be something that we watch for here in southwest Florida as we head on through the day. There is a buoy well offshore now with gusts are getting up around 40 miles per hour there at times. It's even been a bit above that. Down towards the Keys, you can see what we're seeing here. Key Largo back down towards Key West, 10, 15, close to 20-mile-per-hour sustained winds here for us. But where you get in some of that rain, look at Marathon now, a gust up over 30. So that's going to be a key thing here. You get rain coming on through. It'll be downpour with some gusty winds. But in between that, you don't have a whole lot. There in Key Largo, the sustained wind is under 10 miles per hour as the band of rain is to your south and west. There's Key West right now, and there is a band of rain here just to your east as that sneaks on in. Again, we'll see conditions trying to move downhill just a bit in terms of some rain coming on through, and again, those winds getting a little gusty. Now, even outside of the rain as well as the wind, watch for some issues there in the water. Rip current risk here basically are surrounding the state of Florida. There's a high risk here even on the east coast. Again, the system's well on off towards the southwest, but even on the east coast with that general flow coming in from the east, that's setting up the stage for a high risk rip current risk there, and then a moderate risk even as we work our way along the west coast. So getting into the water, not something you don't want to be doing. Windy conditions here across the state as we head on through a good portion of our day. Now, new video coming in from Miami where Eta's heavy downpours last night really flooded many roads across the southern portions of the state. We've seen many cars trying to drive through those flooded roads. Remember that it is always a bad idea. Got to turn around, find another route to take. Now, many locations there in South Florida have already received several inches of rain from Eta, and a few more inches of rain is expected as we move through the days ahead. So let's focus in on this here and check in on what we've got here across South Florida here. This is now as we work right around the lunch hour or so. Again, some of those rain bands still impacting us here, particularly across the Keys. But even as we get into the southwest part here of the state here towards the peninsula, you've got the opportunity for some rain to continue to sneak in, even as we get into later tonight, overnight period as well. There'll be some more rain. And again, within those bands, we see some heavy downpours, gusty winds. Even Tuesday afternoon, you can see some of the rain that we'll see here across South Florida. Miami back into dealing with the rain. So again, some of these areas that have seen quite a bit of rain will add some additional totals to that. Now, overall, here over the next few days, it looks like generally most areas will be looking at less than an inch, maybe an inch or so here as you work your way along the southern tip towards southwest Florida. Now, again, the caveat is you get a heavier downpour that lasts a little longer. that could certainly dump some higher totals. But overall, about an inch of additional rainfall. All right, Key West, here's what your forecast looks like. Not looking so great. The risk for some showers and storms here for the next few days here through at least our Thursday now becomes a bit less numerous by the time we get to Thursday. And then Friday may actually eke out a pretty nice end of the week with temperatures in the lower 80s and a mixture of sun and clouds. All in all, not looking too bad there. All right, let's work our way back towards Fort Lauderdale. Check in with Chris. How are things shaping up there for you?
Well, thankfully, you know, we're not seeing rain, so that's good news. But there's a lot of flooding, guys, and that flash flood warning has been extended now to 3 p.m. No surprise. It's slowly receding, but it's too slow to get back into some neighborhoods. I want to show you this. We got a helicopter here, and this is really the best way to get an overview of the situation. I think they're going around seeing how hard hit some of these neighborhoods have been, and what's the best way to get to some of these people who are essentially stuck either in their homes or their cars have stalled out. But I do see blue skies, so that's encouraging. We may not have much rain the rest of today.
Hurricane season doesn't stop for a pandemic, and neither do we. Get the information you need to stay safe every day, right here on the Weather Channel.
All right, welcome back into the continuing live coverage here as we continue to feel the aftermath now of Tropical Storm Eta. You can see the wind still pretty stiff breeze, nothing like what we were dealing with yesterday, and you are noticing those blue skies. That is a huge saving grace, but the problems are already done, unfortunately, in some neighborhoods, like this one behind me. And this is not just one minute little stretch of street. This goes for, you know, over a mile that way. The whole neighborhood is completely inundated. This is probably one of the hardest hit locations in and around Fort Lauderdale, around Melrose Park. We know Wilton Manor's another hard hit area, and also Sailboat Bend and areas around the New River had some significant flooding. Now, the water is receding, and as long as we don't get any more rain, it will slowly start to recede and go down. The city of Fort Lauderdale, Alex, has about 20-ish pumps that are trying to get to every neighborhood, but you can imagine they are working around the clock to help pump this water out so that people can get back into their homes.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, it'll take a while, but eventually we'll get that water down. Meanwhile, we're also following other big weather stories, including November warmth. Now, doesn't necessarily feel like November in a place like Chicago. Yeah, it hasn't been for a while as we've hit at least 70 degrees the last 5 days. In fact, we can add today now as we've got up to the lower 70s. We've got 2 record highs as well over the last 5 days. And yeah, we've got mid 70s on the way for today in terms of our highs. And you got to remember, the average high for this time of the year, the lower 50s. So we are well above that. And when you start talking being that far above your average, you're going to get into record territory. And not just there in Chicago, but look at this. This is today's map. All the dots that you can see, those are all cities where we do have the potential to break and get to record territory. Let's get in and show some specifics. Memphis is a spot. We're going for 78. The record is 80 there. 80 in Louisville is our forecast. The record is 77. So it could break the record by a good 3 degrees. Into the Great Lakes and Northeast as well. Binghamton's a spot that could break a record by 5 degrees as you expect temp numbers to get up into the lower 70s. And then we keep that going for tomorrow. Again, once again, a lot of these areas here in the eastern third of the country will be well within range, if not even getting up above that. 75 the forecast there in Cincinnati tomorrow. The record is 74. Columbia going for some 80s. May come up a little shy, but certainly close. And Macon is another spot there south of Atlanta. Macon, 78 degrees with the record being 81 there. So all in all, very, very warm times in these areas. Let's bring in Dr. Postel, though, to focus in on what we've got in terms of the wet situation. Wet weather where we've got mostly warm conditions, but there's a chill out there for some, and that's helping to support some snow.
Yeah, I can tell you in the Dakotas right now, it's a lot colder there than it is, Alex, in Macon, Georgia. And you were right to point that out. We've got temperatures in the 20s and 30s in North Dakota and South Dakota, and even in western Minnesota. Detroit Lakes, just to the east of Fargo, is in the 20s. But yet, on the other side of the great state of Minnesota, it's in the 60s. 63 in Minneapolis, 67 on this November morning in the Midwest, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So that is some kind of front. We got about a 40-degree temperature change in about 50 miles or maybe 100 miles or so. That is quite a front. That is going to be moving slowly toward the east today, a little bit. But what's going to be more important, I think, is the development of a surface cyclone along that frontal zone. And we'll see that move northward across the plains and into the Great Lakes. How about that? That's going to draw some colder air southward a bit more effectively, and we're going to see a transition from rain to snow as colder air wraps in behind that developing area of low pressure. Today's forecast shows you probably more rain than snow on the map, with thunderstorms as well as far north as Duluth, Minnesota. And then tonight we see colder air coming in on the backside of it, and I think we're going to see a steady accumulating snow in parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and even south central Minnesota tomorrow, with rain changing to snow in areas farther to the east. Let's say Rochester, Minnesota, Alex, and some thunderstorms in Madison, Wisconsin. And then tomorrow night, accumulating snow on the way for the upper Midwest, with at least 3 to 5 inches in that zone. Alex.
All right, thanks so much, Dr. Postel. And out ahead of that front, we've got more moisture to bring more rain to areas here. And some of that moisture coming from the tropics to help to feed us and give us that threat for some possible flash flooding in a few locations here. Of course, we've got Eta there in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got an area of high pressure off towards the east, and that's helping to push more of that moisture northbound here, again, out ahead of that main front. So that's going to mean wet weather here for us over the next several days. A lot of areas will be getting on that rain train. All right, let's talk about what we've got in terms of the rainfall totals. The European model has quite a bit showing up here in North Florida, South Georgia, in towards South Carolina, the coastal areas there. Main reason is it brings Eta in this general area, so it's bringing in quite a bit of rain into that zone. The GFS model, a different story. Not as much showing up there because it doesn't bring Eta into that area. So not much rainfall there, but with the moisture moving north and that front coming in from the west, it does spit out quite a bit of rain in eastern North Carolina. So we'll have to keep track on that. Still a lot of differences in terms of the model. Where Eta goes will be a big factor in who sees quite a bit of the rain. All right, let's take a look at Wednesday. We get into the southeast, mid-Atlantic, more rainfall here for us. So a bit of a wet time in parts of the east. Now, after the break, we're going to be tracking Eta as it lashes parts of Florida with some of that wind and rain.
All right, check this out. Check out some of the extreme rain bands we had with Eta's periphery as it came through South Florida. This was from Miami overnight, and earlier this morning we had an intense squall that dumped at times 2 to 3 inches of rainfall per hour, and it's really caused significant flooding. We know Brickell had a lot of flooding downtown and south of Key Biscayne. We also know areas over towards Pembroke Pines, Miramar, the Palmetto Expressway, lanes shut down, on-ramps closed, all because of the heavy rains that we've been dealing with and extreme prolific rainfall totals. Unbelievable here from Miami right on into Fort Lauderdale. You know, we had winds too. All right, we did have strong winds. In fact, Fort Lauderdale, strongest gust, 66 miles per hour. We also had a near 70-mile-per-hour gust near Key Largo late last night when the storm made landfall. So here's what we know right now. And again, getting a break from the rain, thankfully, here in Fort Lauderdale. But a lot of flooding, guys. A lot of flooding here as cars try to, what you're seeing is the cars driving there in the distance. They're trying to get out of the neighborhood, trying to get to work in some cases and trying to get some food, but they're essentially stuck there with no way out except for a SWAT vehicle. That's really the only way to go, and there's only a few of those for the city to use. So let's get to what we know with the latest here of Eta right now. It did make landfall.